3 torn backpacks, an abandoned campsite, and a notebook filled with cryptic messages. These were the only clues left behind by a group of campers who vanished in a forest known for strange occurrences. Let's decode these bizarre findings together. The last known steps. Imagine this: 4 friends, backpacks filled with supplies, stepping into the shaded embrace of Black Hollow National Forest. Their voices echoed with excitement as they talked about campfires, starry skies, and the steep cliffs they intended to hike to catch the sunrise. It was late afternoon, and the thick canopy overhead turned the daylight into scattered golden patches on the forest floor. This was supposed to be a fun, carefree weekend far away from the responsibilities of their daily lives. They didn't know it, but those moments at the trailhead would be the last time anyone saw them alive. The group consisted of Ava, a recent college graduate and the group's unofficial leader; Ryan, her laid-back childhood friend; Mia, an adventure enthusiast who loved documenting their trips on her trusty camera; and David, her boyfriend, known for planning everything down to the smallest detail. According to Ryan's mother, who dropped them off, the 4 were eager to explore a less traveled loop deep in the forest, a secluded area only accessible after 2 days of hiking. They planned to stay near Emerald Ridge on the second night. This ridge offered panoramic views of the sprawling forest below, but its isolation made it rare to encounter another soul out there. That suited them just fine. A ranger at a nearby station confirmed sighting the group late that morning. They were cheerful, polite, and had asked about current trail conditions. The ranger told them to watch out for storm clouds later in the week and reminded them of the importance of sticking to marked paths. As far as anyone knows, the group entered the woods together sometime around 1:30 p.m. Then, there was silence. The alarm came 4 days later after Ava's sister realized she hadn't received her usual update text. Family members tried calling, texting, and contacting the service they'd rented the satellite phone from. No reply. By the time search and rescue teams were deployed to Black Hollow, rain from earlier in the week had added new challenges. The trails were slick, and some less stable parts near the heights had crumbled into unpassable seams of mud. Even still, rescuers combed the forest for any sign of the campers. It wasn't until the 7th day that they found their campsite. It appeared hastily abandoned. The fire pit was cold to the touch, surrounded by scattered ash, as if it had been doused with water. 2 tents stood upright. Inside the first one, the searchers found blankets and sleeping bags. In the other, there were snacks, still carefully sealed, and Mia's camera missing its memory card. 3 backpacks lay just outside the tents, torn open as if by something sharp. Their contents, water bottles, cooking gear, sunscreen, were strewn across the forest floor. Nothing about the scene felt normal. A pot with half-cooked leftover pasta sat abandoned near the fire pit, rainwater pooling at its edges. A deck of cards remained mid-game, hidden in the damp grass under the weight of a fallen cup. Food left uneaten and games left unfinished all pointed to one thing: they had been interrupted. But by what? That was the first strange detail. The second was far more perplexing. Investigators found a series of footprints leading away from the campsite. Some seemed disorganized, as though the group had been moving in a hurry. Yet, after only about 50 yards, they disappeared entirely. The forest floor beyond the initial impressions was thick with wet leaves and mud, both ideal surfaces for tracking prints. However, there weren't even partial indentations or smudges. No evidence to suggest where the group had gone. It was as if the campers had evaporated into thin air. When search and rescue teams were later interviewed, their disbelief was all too clear. One team leader said, "In an area that dense, you expect to find something. A dropped phone, a piece of clothing, even broken branches showing a direction they might have taken. But there was nothing. No signs of a struggle, no loose items further into the woods, no animals scavenging near their supplies." Experienced trackers brought in to examine the area described it as eerily undisturbed. Typically, modern search grids leave little margin for error. They cover large areas with repeated heavy sweeps, deploying dogs trained to detect human scent and utilizing thermal imaging to locate body heat. But this time, the dogs found no scent trail beyond the campsite. The thermal sensors returned nothing but an expanse of cold forest. The search team even monitored nearby water sources for signs of footprints or submerged clothing, suspecting the group may have wandered toward one of Black Hollow's many creeks. No lead surfaced. As the days passed, the mood among volunteers darkened. The longer someone is lost in the wilderness, the slimmer their chances of survival. Hypothermia, dehydration, and predatory animals posed constant threats. But none of these risks explained what had happened to Ava, Ryan, Mia, or David. An abandoned site and vanishing footprints left everyone speculating. Did they leave willingly, get lost, or did something, or someone, force them to run? A few searchers broke the tension one evening by muttering about how the forest often seemed unnaturally quiet, like it was listening. The conclusion was as chilling as it was unsatisfying. The official search was suspended after 2 weeks, leaving the question of their disappearance unanswered. The trees surrounding Emerald Ridge swayed in the autumn wind, the only witnesses to what had happened. But the evidence suggested something that couldn't be ignored. The group's final moments hinted at a mystery far greater than any natural explanation. What they did leave behind, the scattered belongings and cryptic clues, would push those questions even further. To understand what may have happened, we need to explore these unsettling artifacts discovered during a second search. The evidence they left behind. What would you think if you stumbled upon a notebook, damp and dirt smudged, its pages filled with disjointed scrawls and fragmented sentences? Fragments that hinted at a growing terror, as if the writer had been trying, and failing, to make sense of something truly unexplainable. This was one of the most unnerving discoveries made during the deeper investigation into the vanished campers of Black Hollow National Forest. But it wasn't the only unsettling clue they left behind. Start with the backpacks. The 3 found at the campsite caught immediate attention, not just because of their placement, but because of their condition. Zippers were broken, flaps torn, and long rips marked the fabric, as if something sharp, maybe claws or a blade, had shredded through them. Rescuers initially thought animals might be responsible, perhaps bears rummaging for food. But there was a problem. Animals usually leave more obvious signs: teeth marks, ragged edges, tracks nearby. These tears were clean, precise in some places, more like intentional slashes than the typical chaotic damage done by wildlife. The belongings near the backpacks, though scattered, held no blood, no indication of a clear struggle. It almost looked like whatever happened didn't take place in a violent frenzy, but rather had caused the campers to flee in panic. A flashlight lay tipped over, its batteries half ejected like it had been dropped mid-use. A hoodie dangled from a low branch, as if snagged while someone rushed past. Even more bizarrely, food packets, visibly undisturbed and far from expiration, were left completely untouched. For seasoned campers, food preservation was second nature. They would have never abandoned such supplies without good reason. And then there was the notebook. Found under one of the open tents, its waterlogged cover clung to the forest floor, like dead weight, masking the chaos waiting inside. Once carefully dried, the rescuers could make out its contents, a messy mix of hastily written notes and strange repeating symbols. Some pages were smeared, words bleeding into one another, but others outlined incomplete phrases, almost nonsensical at first glance. Phrases like, "a shadow's between the trees," and "don't look too long." One passage was scratched out furiously, written over again and again, as if the author couldn't emphasize the thought enough. It's still here, watching. Yet the most chilling sentence came near the final few entries. Simple, stark, etched into the dampening paper with visible force. It's watching us. We can't escape. No signing of names, no context, just the words hanging there like unanswered questions. Why had someone written this, and why hadn't they escaped? Some wondered if the notebook held an increasingly paranoid account, possibly a sign the group was succumbing to mental strain. Isolation and wilderness can play tricks on the mind, especially when combined with exhaustion or stress. This theory gained momentary traction among investigators. However, the tight timeline of the group's disappearance complicated this. They'd only been away from civilization for 3 days, barely enough time for exposure or malnutrition to impact their judgment in any extreme way. This wasn't the only strange evidence. Locals who assisted the search described hearing unusual sounds as they combed the woods. They spoke of distant howls or guttural groans that didn't match any known animal species in the area. Some said there were voices, faint and melodic, whispering incomprehensible words far beyond where searchers stood. Veteran volunteers brushed these stories aside, chalking them up to wind, echo effects, or even tired ears straining under the weight of the search. But deep down, many couldn't deny the unnatural weight those noises carried. One local searcher, too unnerved to continue, later recalled, "It wasn't just a sound, it was like the forest itself was breathing." When confronted with the physical evidence, wildlife experts argued the simplest explanations. They suggested the scrawled warnings in the notebook were nothing more than fearful ramblings inspired by nearby predators or the campers' natural anxieties magnified over time. Perhaps they mistook a bear or even a large owl for something stalking them. The torn backpacks, some posited, might have come from the work of scavengers after the campers had already abandoned the site. And yet, each of these theories fell short in some way. How could wild animals be responsible for footprints that abruptly disappeared? Why were food and supplies untouched by any claw, strewn yet preserved? Rain, too, couldn't explain it all. Mud-lined trails should have amplified track visibility, not erased it entirely without a trace. And as for foul play at the hands of a person, that theory unraveled under the lack of secondary prints, tools, or signs of another party nearby. What kind of human would leave no evidence while inciting such chaos? The more answers they struggled to provide, the more implausible the answers sounded. Above all, the real exclamation point to these findings was the notebook itself. It hinted at something unseen, stealthy, a feeling that followed them right up until they vanished. The frantic tone of the writing wasn't just fear. It was the kind of fear that takes over when something is too overwhelming to process. And those final words, "We can't escape," felt less like a conclusion and more like a warning. But can a place do that? Can a forest hold that kind of power? Or was it something inside the forest, something lurking just past the edges of their vision? The mysteries of Black Hollow National Forest only deepen when viewed through those who have long known it best, the locals. And if their stories are true, these disappearances might be just the newest chapter in the forest's cursed history. Theories and local legends. Some say Black Hollow National Forest breathes, its ancient trees standing not as plants but as silent sentinels, watching every step you take. Others believe the place is cursed, a magnet for tragedy, its untouched wilderness, hiding far more than just animals and trails. But around here, mention Black Hollow to anyone who's lived in the area long enough, and they'll tell you this forest isn't normal. People vanish here, they'll say, without warning and without a trace. And if the stories are true, the 4 missing campers may not have been the first or the last. Local lore surrounding Black Hollow stretches back to the earliest settlers, who warned of strange events in the forest even in its earliest history. There are accounts of men walking into the woods for firewood, only to vanish by sunset. Neighbors would later find their tools abandoned on the forest floor, axes stuck upright in tree stumps, as though their owners had simply disappeared mid-chop. Another story tells of a search party venturing after a missing farmer. According to the tale, the rescuers returned pale-faced and trembling, claiming they'd heard desperate cries echoing through the woods, a voice that called for help but sounded wrong, almost inhuman. These warnings were passed down for generations, often in whispers. If someone went missing in the forest, nobody went looking. Locals believed if the forest took you, there was no getting you back. Modern visitors to the area have their own tales to share, blending superstition with unsettling first-hand experiences. Hikers say they felt compelled to stop, mid-trail, only to realize a presence lurking just beyond the edges of their vision. Others speak of voices, sometimes their own names, beckoning them to step off the path and deeper into the tangles of trees. One local hunter, James Porter, described a hunting trip in 1998 where he claimed to see shapes moving between the trunks, tall, shadowy figures at the edges of his peripheral vision. They looked human but always just out of reach, dissolving the moment he tried to focus. "It messes with your head," Porter said. "You're watching shadows that don't belong and thinking maybe it's the dark playing tricks, but then you realize you're being watched back. And then there are the lights. For years, Black Hollow has been the site of strange glowing orbs seen drifting in its deepest sections. Green and blue spheres hover between the trees, blinking in and out like fireflies too large and too bright to make sense. No one knows what they are. UFO enthusiasts believe they're connected to extraterrestrials, while others think they're linked to the forest's deadly reputation, as if they're markers for something sinister. Some researchers attribute these to bioluminescent insects or swamp gases, common in other parts of the world, yet every explanation falls short when you consider their patterns. As one visitor described, they weren't random, they moved with purpose, like they were leading you somewhere. Skeptics insist there are rational answers for the forest's eerie reputation. Isolation can do strange things to a person's mind. Prolonged quiet and sensory deprivation trigger heightened fear responses, making faint sounds feel amplified or shadows seem alive. Infrasound, low-frequency noise caused by wind or geological activity, can reportedly cause unease or paranoia in those exposed to it. And the voices? Some scientists believe they're simply audio illusions triggered by wind patterns echoing through the trees, filtered in such a way that the brain misinterprets them as familiar sounds. But believers push back on these theories, arguing that some experiences are too vivid, too consistent, and too aligned across so many accounts to dismiss as nature messing with your senses. Adding to the mystery, Black Hollow National Forest sits on top of a geological peculiarity, a sprawling cave system that remains largely unexplored to this day. The cave's many entrances lie hidden, scattered throughout the dense woods like forgotten doorways to an entirely different world. Speleologists have mapped parts of it, but large sections remain untouched, and stories persist of strange noises emanating from its depths. Some cave divers claim to have felt vibrations underfoot, like soft pulses thrumming through the ground, while others report the sensation of being watched in the darkest tunnels. There is no shortage of speculation about what could be hiding underneath. The cave has been linked to everything from secret military facilities to gateways that aren't of this earth. Could the missing campers have stumbled into one of these openings? While it's possible, even that doesn't fully explain the torn backpacks, the absence of footprints, or the cryptic messages left behind in the notebook. What if they disturbed something inside the forest that wasn't meant to be found? Accounts from locals often circle back to one core belief: Black Hollow protects its secrets by any means necessary. As one elder put it bluntly, the forest takes what it wants and nobody argues. This isn't the kind of place to discount supernatural explanations. Some locals believe Black Hollow is haunted by malevolent spirits, remnants of those who died there or entities older than humanity itself. Others whisper of darker theories involving secret experiments, government cover-ups, or even interdimensional rifts, doorways to realms beyond ours. Yet no single theory can account for the mounting evidence, the strange clues, or the overwhelming sense that the forest is somehow involved, with purpose and intent. So what really happened to the campers? Did they stumble onto something unnatural? Or could they have been victims of a force much larger, something far beyond just these woods? Black Hollow National Forest is filled with questions, and with every tragic disappearance, those answers seem to slip further out of reach. The truth is, we may never know what happened to those campers. Their belongings, the strange messages, and the chilling silence of the forest point to something beyond explanation, something the human mind struggles to grasp. It's as if Black Hollow is hiding an answer that it refuses to give up, keeping whatever happened shrouded in shadow. So the next time you step into the woods, ask yourself, what's out there, watching from just beyond the trees? And what happens if it chooses to act? Tell us, what do you think happened? Have you experienced something strange in the wilderness? We're listening, if you dare.